On February 29th, 2016, I was sitting in math class. It was my senior year, easier than ever. I was taking notes along with the class when we heard a loud pop come from the hallway. The kind that makes your stomach drop. But really, it just sounded like a textbook being dropped onto the floor from about 5 feet up. It wasn't until we heard 3 more pops, much closer to each other, that everyone froze. The teacher was at the front of the room and even stopped teaching. The class was nervously locking eyes with one another, looking around. A girl uttered, was that a gun? My best friend that was in class with me that day replied, yeah, that was a gun. His sarcasm was quickly deemed as misplaced when I looked out the door and saw students running extremely fast down the hallway. I turned to the other side of the classroom to look out of the large windows facing the parking lot and saw dozens of students sprinting across it also. I saw one student, separate from the rest, sprinting in a different direction. This turned out to be the student who fired the gun 4 times in the cafeteria of my high school. 4 students were hit, but all survived with non-life-threatening injuries. What followed that was a shaky lockdown call by the receptionist, the shooter being arrested, a few helicopters landing, the parking lot being stormed with over 50 police cars, and SWAT teams raiding each classroom. What happened beyond what I experienced in my math class is a student brought a gun to school in his lunchbox and showed it off to a few students in the morning. Those students who saw it waited until lunch for what they thought would be the perfect time to get up and tell an adult. It evidently was not, because the shooter caught on to what they were doing, got up from his seat, and bolted for the door. While doing so, he fired the gun 4 times behind his back into the crowd of students eating lunch. Luckily, only 4 students were injured by shrapnel and non-life-threatening bullet wounds. It was a devastating blow to the small community that I went to school in. We didn't have school for a few days, and it's all everyone talked about. I don't have any trouble talking about it now, but that may be very different if there had been any deaths. Regardless, the event has changed the way that I think forever. As you can imagine, it was all I too thought about for a very long time. One of the big parts of my story is it being my senior year during the shooting. Of course, all the things myself and my friends had always said we wanted to be when we grew up, we didn't want to be anymore. It was almost like a scramble to decide what we actually wanted to do for the rest of our lives. I wasn't scrambling as much as everyone else, though. I had it figured out for a while that I wanted to teach art. I've always admired teachers and thought it seemed like a good fit. But the way I saw teachers react in that situation was different than how they normally acted. A lot were scared, and this is something I had never seen a teacher be before. This brought me to thinking about my future career as a teacher. I mean, the connection is obvious. This happened in a school, and I want to be working in a school. So what if something like this happened at a school I was teaching at? How would I react? What about before it happened? Could there have been any signs? What if a student having thoughts of doing something like this was sitting in my classroom? What could I do to help them? Those questions are huge, and I am by no means claiming that I have the answers to all of them just because I was in a shooting and I want to also be a teacher. But there's one thing that I believed back in high school and still believe to this day. It's that in a learning environment, nothing is more important than the individual student. Let's make this clear first. I'm not saying that if there were better teachers in my school that this could have been prevented. But in the recent pushes for safer schools, I believe that effective teaching is not to be ignored. Here at Miami, I've studied effective teaching for the past 3 years, essentially. One thing that continues to be confirmed to me is this fact. Nothing is more important than the individual student. I think it applies to school violences like the one I experienced. Now, I know you're probably thinking, how do these even relate? Before giving you my pitch on why this is so wonderful, let me explain it with bad examples first. Thinking about what not to do in this make-believe future situation of a troubled kid with violent thoughts in my classroom. Imagine a child with a very troubled home life and possibly abusive parenting. The time in which they spend at school, they are also being parented in a sense by the teachers. On average, 9.4% of a person's life up to the age of 18 is spent in school. The worst thing that we could do as teachers in that situation is exemplify those traits that they face at home, such as abusing power, shutting down new ideas, neglecting them, not seeing their true potential, or unthoughtfully punishing them. We must be the opposite of that for all of our students, but especially the ones that face authority figures at home that do exhibit those bad examples. As teachers, we must be positive positions of power in the students' time spent at school. We must welcome new ideas. We must use effective classroom management before disciplining them. We must form relationships of trust with them. We must ensure that our classrooms are safe spaces where no students are pitted against one another. This isn't an explanation for why the tragedy we survived at Madison High School happened. This isn't a holistic explanation for any violent school tragedy happening. That is far too complex for me or anyone to really understand. I know it isn't the ultimate answer, probably not even the best one. I'm simply using what I am passionate about, which is teaching, to try and combat horrible things like this. This is my unique voice on helping to fight this problem. It is one of the major things that I took away from reflecting on surviving this event, and it has forever changed the way that I think about teaching for the rest of my life. So I ask my fellow students pursuing teaching careers, the teachers all over the world, and students in school. Treat the students in your class with care. Know that there are battles in their life that you know nothing about, just like the ones you have. Know that their lives outside of school could be a lot more difficult than yours, and maybe we can all help lead schools to be safer. Thank you.